Why would one of the most powerful men in the global automotive industry, a man whose family name is synonymous with Japanese precision and billion-dollar boardrooms, choose to spend his private sabbatical in the grease-stained overalls of a roadside mechanic in the heart of Cavite, Philippines? This is the question that many in the corporate world of Nagoya would find impossible to answer. But for Mr. Hiroshi Tanaka, the reality of his journey was far more profound than a simple vacation. Tanaka had spent 30 years climbing the ladder of Toyota's executive branch, becoming a master of efficiency, cold logic, and the Kaizen philosophy of continuous improvement. However, in his pursuit of perfection, he felt he had lost the most important component of any machine, the human soul. He had heard stories of the legendary resilience and ingenuity of Filipino workers, but he wanted to see if the Filipino heart he often heard about was a marketing myth or a living truth. He arrived in the Philippines not with a business delegation or a fleet of black sedans, but as a humble, middle-aged man looking for work, carrying nothing but a small bag of tools and a deep-seated curiosity. He chose Cavite, a province known for its industrial grit and its history of revolution, to begin his undercover life. He didn't want to be treated like a boss. He wanted to be treated like a nobody. To do this, he had to perfect his disguise, learning basic Tagalog phrases and adopting the weathered look of a man who had spent his life under the hood of a car. He found a small, struggling Talyer on the outskirts of Dasmariñas, a place where the roof leaked during the afternoon monsoons, and the air was thick with the scent of diesel and burnt oil. The shop was owned by a man named Mang Kanor, a veteran mechanic whose hands were permanently stained black by decades of labor. When Tanaka, posing as a migrant worker with Japanese-Filipino roots, asked for a job, Kanor looked at the older man's clean hands and laughed. He told him that he couldn't afford a new hire, especially not someone who looked like they belonged in an office. But Tanaka didn't leave. He waited outside the shop for 3 days, sitting on an old tire, watching the way the local mechanics worked. He saw them repair engines with nothing but scrap metal and sheer willpower, fixing vehicles that should have been in a junkyard years ago. This was his first taste of controlled disbelief. In Japan, if a part was broken, it was replaced with a genuine factory-sealed component. Here, in this humid corner of Cavite, he watched a young boy fix a radiator leak using a piece of chewing gum and a strip of rubber from an old slipper. On the 4th day, Mang Kanor finally gave in, handing Tanaka a wrench and pointing to a battered 1990s Tamaraw FX that had been sitting in the corner for weeks. "If you can make this run, you stay," Kanor said with a challenge in his eyes. What Kanor didn't know was that he was talking to a man who helped design the very engines that drove the modern world. Tanaka spent the next 12 hours in silence, working side by side with the local boys. He expected to find chaos and inefficiency, but instead he found a rhythm he had never seen in his automated factories. He found a community. The mechanics didn't just work. They shared stories, they teased each other, and most importantly, they shared their food. At lunchtime, despite having very little, the youngest apprentice, a teenager named Jojo, offered Tanaka half of his salted egg and rice. Tanaka tried to refuse, knowing the boy probably hadn't eaten much that morning, but Jojo insisted, saying, "Basta Pinoy, hatian tayo." This simple act of sharing, done without a second thought, was the first crack in Tanaka's executive armor. As the days turned into weeks, Tanaka became an invisible observer of the Filipino spirit. He witnessed a customer come in with a broken jeepney, desperate because it was his only source of income for his family. When the man realized he didn't have enough money for the repair, he saw Mang Kanor sigh, shake his head, and then do the work for free anyway, telling the driver to just pay him back when the next harvest came. Tanaka was stunned. In the corporate world, a debt was a debt, and a service had a fixed price. But here, the Filipino way seemed to operate on a currency of mercy and trust. He began to wonder who was truly more advanced. The billionaire with the perfect balance sheet, or the mechanic who slept on a cot in his shop but never let a neighbor go hungry? Tanaka's presence in the shop began to draw a quiet mystery. Some of the locals noticed that while he spoke little, his hands moved with a precision that was almost supernatural. He could diagnose an engine knock just by resting his palm on the hood. Rumors began to circulate that he was a fallen engineer or a man running from a dark past in Osaka. Tanaka stayed focused on his mission, secretly documenting every act of integrity he witnessed. He was looking for a reason to bring a massive manufacturing plant to this specific region, but he needed to know if the people possessed the one thing money couldn't buy: character. The turning point of this slow-burn mystery happened during a massive tropical storm that hit Cavite with a ferocity that caught everyone off guard. The small Talyer was quickly flooded, and the surrounding community was in danger of losing everything. Tanaka watched as the mechanics, instead of saving their own tools or personal belongings, ran into the rising waters to help the elderly neighbors move their furniture to higher ground. He saw Mankanor using his own meager savings to buy sacks of rice for the families whose homes had been submerged. It was in this moment of crisis that Tanaka's disguise was almost compromised. A high-ranking local official, who had previously met Tanaka during a formal business gala in Manila years prior, was stranded in the flood near the shop. As the official looked for help, his eyes met Tanaka's. The executive frozen, his grease-covered face the only thing protecting his billion-dollar identity. Would the official recognize the man who controlled the destiny of thousands of jobs? More importantly, would Tanaka choose to stay in his role as a humble mechanic, or would he use his power to save himself from the rising mud? Tanaka chose to stay in the shadows, continuing to huddle with the local workers, shivering in the cold, eating the same canned sardines they shared among 10 people. He realized that for the first time in his life, he wasn't being respected because of his title or his bank account. He was being respected because he was one of them. He was a Filipino in spirit, bound by the same struggle and the same unshakable hope. The hidden truth he had been searching for was finally revealing itself. The Philippines wasn't just a place of cheap labor or emerging markets. It was a sanctuary of human kindness that the modern world had forgotten. But as the floodwaters receded, a new challenge emerged. The Talyer, Mankanor's lifework, had been severely damaged. The tools were rusted, the structure was leaning, and a local predatory developer was already circling the property, offering a pittance to buy the land and turn it into a parking lot. Tanaka saw the heartbreak in Mankanor's eyes, a man who had given everything to his community and was now about to lose his only means of survival. It was time for the disguised executive to make a choice. Would he let the shop close and return to his life of luxury in Japan, or would he reveal the secret he had been carrying in his tool bag? The mystery of what Tanaka did next would not only save the shop, but would lead to a revelation that would change the map of Cavite forever, proving that sometimes the greatest investment a billionaire can make isn't in a factory, but in the heart of a single humble mechanic. The aftermath of the storm left the small Cavite neighborhood in a state of quiet devastation. But for Mr. Tanaka, the silence was louder than the thunder that had preceded it. He watched as Mankanor sat on a rusted bench, his head in his hands, staring at the mud-caked interior of the shop that represented 40 years of his life. The predatory developer's agent had already visited twice that morning, waving a contract that promised a quick exit from the misery. But Tanaka knew that for Kanor, signing that paper would be like signing away his soul. The controlled disbelief that Tanaka had maintained for weeks was now replaced by a burning sense of duty. He realized that the kaizen he practiced in Japan, the constant striving for better, was hollow if it didn't apply to the lives of the people who actually built the world with their bare hands. He approached Mankanor, not as the executive who commanded thousands, but as the quiet assistant who had shared his salt and rice. Tanaka didn't speak at first. Instead, he began cleaning. He picked up the rusted wrenches and the waterlogged manuals, showing the others that as long as they were standing, the work wasn't finished. This act of silent solidarity sparked a fire in the younger mechanics. And soon, the sound of metal hitting metal returned to the Talyer. However, Tanaka knew that cleaning wasn't enough. The shop needed capital, it needed a future, and it needed a shield against the greed of those who saw poverty as an opportunity for profit. That night, Under the dim light of a single rechargeable bulb, Tanaka reached into the secret compartment of his tool bag and pulled out a sleek, satellite-encrypted phone that had remained dormant since he stepped foot in Manila. He made a single phone call to his headquarters in Nagoya. He didn't ask for a rescue, he gave an order. He told his board of directors that the location for the new Southeast Asian Innovation Center had been found, not in a gleaming industrial park in Singapore or Vietnam, but in a specific coordinate in Dasmariñas, Cavite. The confusion on the other end of the line was palpable, but Tanaka's voice carried the weight of a man who had seen the truth. He explained that he had found a workforce that didn't just understand mechanics, but understood the value of Malasakit, the Filipino word for selfless care. The next morning, the mystery reached its boiling point. A convoy of black vehicles arrived at the muddy Talyer, but this time they weren't developers. They were Japanese engineers and lawyers led by the very official who had nearly recognized Tanaka during the flood. The neighborhood gathered around, whispering in Tagalog about the Hapon who had come to take Mangkanor's land. But as the official stepped out, he didn't head for the office. He walked straight to the man in the greasy, sweat-stained overalls and bowed deeply, lower than anyone had ever seen a man bow to a mechanic. "Tanaka-sama," he whispered, "everything is ready." The shock that rippled through the community was like an electric current. Mangkanor stood frozen, his mouth open, as Jojo, the young apprentice, dropped his wrench in the mud. The man they had been teaching to fix old engines was actually the king of the automotive world. Tanaka stepped forward and took off his grease-stained cap, revealing the sharp, intelligent eyes that had been hidden under the brim. He spoke to the crowd in the Tagalog he had practiced every night. "I came here to find a better engine, but you taught me how to find a better heart." He then turned to Mangkanor and handed him a folder. It wasn't a contract to buy the land, it was a partnership agreement. Tanaka revealed that Toyota would not be bulldozing the Talyer. Instead, they were going to build the region's first community-driven engineering hub right there, with Mangkanor as the chief consultant and Jojo as the first full scholarship apprentice to be sent to Japan. He explained that the hub would be dedicated to Filipino ingenuity, the art of fixing the impossible with nothing but a dream and a strip of rubber. The predatory developer's agent, who had been watching from the sidelines, slunk away into the shadows, realizing that he had tried to bully a man who had the backing of a global empire. But the true revelation wasn't the money or the new building. It was the way Tanaka refused to change his clothes until the shop was fully restored. For the next 3 days, the billionaire executive worked alongside the locals, finishing the repairs on the old Tamaraw FX he had started on his first day. When the engine finally roared to life, the cheer that went up from the Caviteño mechanics was louder than any applause Tanaka had ever received in a boardroom. It was the sound of dignity restored. As the story began to hit the news cycles across Asia, many were skeptical, calling it a PR stunt or a corporate fairy tale. But for the people of that small barangay in Cavite, the truth was in the results. Tanaka didn't just build a factory, he built a community clinic, a modern school, and he ensured that every mechanic who had worked in that Talyer became a shareholder in the new venture. He had learned that in the Philippines, you don't just hire a worker, you join a family. On his final day in the country, Tanaka went back to the quiet spot by the river where he had once eaten sardines in the rain. He sat with Mangkanor, and for the first time they spoke as equals. Kanor asked him why he chose them, out of all the people in the world. Tanaka looked at his hands, which were still slightly stained with oil, despite the expensive soap he now had access to, and replied that in Japan, they make machines that never fail, but in the Philippines, they make people who never give up. He realized that his disguise wasn't about hiding who he was, but about finding who he was meant to be. The executive who once cared only for Kaizen now cared for Kapwa, the recognition of a shared identity. The documentary concludes with a powerful cinematic shot of the new facility, where the original rusted sign of Mangkanor's Talyer is preserved in glass at the entrance, a reminder of where it all began. Tanaka is seen back in Japan, but on his wrist, he no longer wears a $1 million watch. He wears a simple woven bracelet given to him by Jojo, a symbol of a bond that transcends borders and bank accounts. The mystery of the Japanese executive changed the landscape of Cavite, but the kindness of the Filipino changed the soul of the billionaire. It serves as a permanent reminder to the world that the greatest innovations don't happen in laboratories, but in the moments when we choose to see the humanity in the person standing next to us, no matter what clothes they are wearing or what language they speak. The Filipino mechanic didn't need a billionaire to teach him how to work, but the billionaire desperately needed the Filipino to teach him how to live. This story is a testament to the fact that when you give from a place of lack, your gift is worth more than all the gold in the world. As we look at the rising skyline of the new Cavite, we don't see just buildings. We see the legacy of a man who was brave enough to get his hands dirty and a people who were kind enough to let him in. If this story of hidden identity and the power of Filipino values moved you, please let us know in the comments. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone's kindness changed your life?